They drank the blood of their enemies. That was the first thing the ancient chroniclers whispered about the Scythians, a people so feared that even the mighty Persian Empire trembled at their name. To the civilized world of marble temples and gilded thrones, they were not men at all, but phantoms of the steppe, wild horsemen cloaked in furs, eyes sharp as blades, their hearts colder than iron. They came like storms, silent at first, then screaming like wolves, leaving only fire and bones behind. No walls could stop them. No gods could tame them. The Scythians were born of the wind, and death rode at their heels. Their land was endless, a sea of grass stretching from the Danube River to the black edges of Siberia. They had no cities, no temples, no kings carved in stone. They were ghosts on horseback, drifting with the herds, answering to no one but their gods of sky and blood. The ancient historian Herodotus called them the most savage people he had ever known. He wrote that they drank the blood of the first man they killed in battle, that they flayed the scalps of their enemies and wore them as trophies, that they turned human skulls into drinking cups. The civilized world read these words with horror and fascination. What kind of people could live without mercy? What kind of people could make war their only god? Among the Scythians, death was not an end, but a celebration. When a warrior fell, his body was not buried quietly. It was paraded across the steppe on a black-draped wagon, followed by his wives, his slaves, his horses, all of whom knew they would soon follow him into the earth. At his grave mound, they were strangled and buried alive to serve him in the afterlife. His favorite concubine was killed and laid beside him. Horses were slaughtered and arranged like a ghostly army around the tomb, their skulls painted red, their hooves pointed toward the horizon. And when the earth was finally piled high over this bloody theater, the Scythians rode away, their howls echoing through the grass like the cries of wolves. They believed the dead could not rest without blood. They believed the soul needed warriors to guard it, slaves to serve it, horses to carry it into the next world. It was not cruelty to them. It was duty. But to the outside world, it was terror. When the Greeks first met the Scythians, they thought they had found demons in human skin. These nomads appeared from the mists, arrows hissing from beyond sight, cutting down men before they could even raise their shields. They vanished just as quickly, their hooves leaving only torn earth behind. The Greeks told stories of how the Scythians drank from the skulls of kings and bathed in the blood of soldiers. Even the Persians, who ruled half the known world, feared to fight them. Darius the Pharaoh, king of kings, once led an army of hundreds of thousands into the steppe to crush them. The Scythians did not fight. They burned their own grass, poisoned their own wells, and vanished into the horizon. Darius marched deeper, his men starving, their horses dying beneath them, until they saw only endless sky and empty earth. The Scythians circled them like wolves, slashing at their flanks, stealing their supplies, until the Persians broke and fled. The steppe swallowed them whole. This was the power of the Scythians. They could not be conquered because they were not bound to anything, no walls, no farms, no cities to burn. They were the wind, and the wind cannot be killed. And yet within this chaos they had a code, a savage law older than any kingdom. A Scythian warrior was expected to kill, not just enemies in battle, but to take trophies to prove his worth. When he slew a foe, he cut off the man's head and rode with it tied to his saddle. Later, he would skin the scalp, stretching it like parchment, softening it with his hands until it became thin as leather. He would sew these scalps onto his cloak until it shimmered like a robe of ghosts. The more scalps he wore, the greater his honor. Some warriors carried human hands nailed to their saddles like grisly charms. Others took the right arm of their enemy and offered it to their god of war. This god, they said, was not a man, not even an idol, but a sword driven into the earth, stained with the blood of the slain. Before battle, they poured wine and the blood of captives on the blade, chanting to it as if it were alive. The sword did not answer, but it did not need to. Death answered for it. Their rituals were soaked in blood, but they were not chaos. They were theater, myth, and terror woven into one. When a boy became a man, he had to kill. Not an animal, not a rival in sport. He had to take a life. Only then could he sit among the warriors. Only then could he drink the sacred wine mixed with blood. If he failed, he was nothing, invisible, a shadow among men. The women were no less fearsome. Scythian women could ride and fight as well as any man. Some never married, living only for war. The Greeks feared them and called them Amazons, thinking no real women could be so deadly. But they were real. They hunted, they killed, and they carried scalps at their belts like the men did. To live among the Scythians was to live inside a storm of blood and steel. And yet, beneath the terror, there was beauty. Their clothes shimmered with gold, sewn into patterns of stags and eagles. Their horses wore bronze masks shaped like snarling beasts. They carved tiny golden panthers locked in eternal battle, as if to say, "This is who we are, forever fighting, forever wild." They believed their souls became eagles when they died. And when their warriors rode into battle, they believed they carried the spirits of their ancestors on the wind. They were not mad. They were not beasts. They were something stranger. People who had chosen war as their only god and offered their lives to it like a sacrifice. The world could not understand them, but it feared them, and that fear grew, because the Scythians were not content to haunt the edges of civilization. They began to ride west. Their arrows fell on Thrace, on Macedonia, even on the gates of Athens itself. Each raid left more skulls on their saddles, more blood on their blades, and each time they vanished into the mist again, leaving behind only burning cities and the echo of hooves. No one knew where they came from. No one knew where they went. Some said they had no homeland, that they were born from the bones of the earth. Others said they were the souls of the damned, riding forever across the world because no underworld would take them. But the truth was darker. The Scythians were not just raiders. They were hunters, and they were beginning to hunt kings. That is where the real terror begins. They came for kings. When the Scythians struck next, it was not a border village or a wandering caravan. It was Assyria, the Iron Empire of the ancient world. The Scythians descended like thunder from the steppe, thousands of horsemen streaking through the dawn mist, their arrows falling before the Assyrians even heard the hooves. Witnesses said they screamed like wild animals, faces painted black, their cloaks flapping with human scalps. No fortress could stop them. They burned fields, slit the throats of livestock, poisoned wells, and vanished into the hills. Then they returned again and again until the Assyrian generals broke. The Babylonians called them spirits of death. The Medes feared them so deeply they offered their own princess to marry a Scythian warlord just to buy peace. And yet, in the courts of these trembling empires, the Scythians became honored guests. They drank wine from golden cups, feasted on roasted oxen, and lounged in silk halls like kings themselves. But their eyes stayed cold. Even as they smiled, they wore daggers at their belts, because the Scythians were never truly allies. They were waiting, watching, counting how many steps it would take from those palace gates to the throne. And one night they made their move. Blood ran down the temple steps like rain. The Scythians had betrayed their hosts. After years of false peace in Media, they struck without warning. At dawn, as the priests lit incense to their gods, Scythian riders stormed through the sacred precincts like demons. Their arrows ripped through silk curtains, shattered statues, and pinned men to the walls. Witnesses said the Scythians laughed as they killed, laughing like wolves. The Medes fought desperately, but they were soft from luxury. The Scythians had grown fat, too. Drunk on foreign gold, their discipline dulled. Yet their fury was enough. They cut down nobles, burned granaries, and carried off anything they could move, gold, horses, women. But arrogance is a slow poison. In their hunger, the Scythians lingered too long. They feasted and captured palaces, desecrating shrines with bloodied hands. They mocked the local gods, dragging idols through the streets. They roasted sacred oxen on temple fires and turned holy altars into gambling tables. The Medes watched, silent, smiling, waiting. One night, the Cyaxares, king of the Medes, invited the Scythian war chiefs to a grand feast. Rivers of wine flowed, the halls echoed with music and drunken shouting. One by one, the Scythians grew loud, then sluggish, then still. The cups had been poisoned. When the last of them collapsed, the Medes rose with knives. They slit the throats of every Scythian they could find in the city. Hundreds of horsemen died with their faces in their cups, their blood soaking into the silk carpets. Outside the palace, the rest of the Scythians were ambushed. Flaming arrows rained from the walls. The gates slammed shut. Trapped between stone and fire, they died screaming under the swords of the Medes. The steppe ghosts were broken. The survivors fled east, abandoning their stolen treasures, their captives, even their wounded comrades. They rode for days without stopping, through mountains and desert winds, until the rich lands were far behind and only the endless grass remained. But exile did not humble them, it hardened them. Back on the steppe, they became something even darker. They abandoned the soft silks and golden cups of foreign courts and returned to their old gods, the cold, nameless ones who demanded blood. They performed the old rites again, drinking the blood of the first enemy they killed in battle, scalping their foes, and wearing the skins of their enemies sewn into their cloaks. They buried their dead chieftains in great mounds called kurgans, slaughtering horses and slaves to follow them into the underworld. And when the priests slit the throats of those victims, the people cheered. Their power returned. In time, the Scythians became a shadow empire, feared but unseen. Traders carried their goods, not their banners. Kings whispered their name, but never dared to summon them. They lived like storms on the horizon, unpredictable, unstoppable, and always coming back. But their bloodlust had cursed them. For every victory they won, another warlord rose to challenge his own brothers. They fought each other as fiercely as any enemy. Steppe burned against steppe, tribe against tribe, until even their victories tasted of ashes. And in the chaos, new predators were rising from the east. The Scythians had returned to their roots, but now the world they left behind was sharpening its swords. And the next time foreign armies came riding toward the steppe, they would not be running. The wind howled over the empty kurgans. Where once the Scythians ruled the steppe like living thunder, now only bones remained. Their horse herds thinned, their warlords slain by their own kin, their blood-soaked glory turned to dust. New riders came from the east, the Sarmatians, fierce and hungry, with iron spears and restless eyes. They found the Scythians fractured, their sacred rites hollow, their gods silent. One battle followed another, and the ancient clans fell like broken arrows. The few who survived fled west, ragged and beaten. They hid in forgotten valleys, clinging to stories of when their ancestors drank the blood of kings. But no one feared them now. The people who once seemed immortal vanished into the winds they had ruled. Their kurgans still rise from the steppe like dark scars, guarded by silence. Beneath them lie warriors wrapped in gold and blood, staring forever at the sky they could not conquer. And when the wind moans across the plains, the nomads whisper that it is the voices of the Scythians, laughing, still thirsty, still lost,